Hey everyone, it's Bob Perkins with AAISP's Inside Sales Studio, bringing you another Monday morning Sales Minute. I'm here with special guest Nick Cegelski. Nick, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Bob. I'm excited to be here.
Well, Nick's right on the front lines. He's an enterprise account executive with a company called SurePoint. So he's doing sales and prospecting every single day. But Nick also has a new to be released podcast called 30 Minutes to President's Club. In fact, I'll be joining him on an episode of that as well. But let's get into today's topic. It has to do with really all this activity we're supposed to do, right? And how do we get it done? And is activity what is really needed to get us to our results? So you have some ideas about this, Nick.
Sure. The biggest quip around that I have is actually something that my high school wrestling coach taught me a long time ago. And he always said, don't mistake activity for achievement. And that has stuck in my head forever. The context he was sharing it under was just because you showed up and did a 3-hour wrestling practice doesn't mean you really got anything done, because it's very easy to go through the motions and not actually improve.
Yeah.
And I think that is directly applicable to our world in sales. A lot of folks forget that your job as a salesperson is to make an impact. It's actually to get things done. When you're an SDR, an AE, when you're prospecting, your job is to get meetings and schedule conversations with people. And I see a lot of sales leaders put these activity metrics on people. You've got to make 100 phone calls today, or I want you to send 200 emails. And there's two sides to it. There's the importance of personalization and the smart work. I hear a lot of this idea of smart work versus hard work. And frankly, I think you have to have both if you want to succeed. Sometimes people use the idea of working smarter as an excuse. Not put the work in. But you and I were talking about this when we were doing a little bit of prep, Bob. Sometimes it's actually better to slow down, get your head focused on what's actually going to garner a result.
Yes.
And do that instead of just go through the motion, make 100 phone calls to people who haven't ever answered the phone for you, and you've reached out 120 times, and okay, maybe you need to find somebody new. And so part of what I think sales reps need to do if they want to succeed is start actually picking your head up out of the sand and look and figure out what direction do I actually need to go to succeed. I had to do this recently. I've been doing a lot of prospecting, and I was calling the same list that I've been calling for months. And finally I said, well, none of these people have answered. There's something to be said for persistence, but it might be time to go after a new list, like make a new list, find some new folks who I can have some conversations with. And by virtue of picking my head out of the sand and spending a day not calling and making a new list and researching some new folks that I could try and have conversations with, it's fun and it's new, and I'm actually setting a lot more meetings. So
good.
That's my big piece of advice to folks right now.
That's really good. You know, when you were talking about doing the same thing over and over again, I'm an avid golfer and I've really improved. I'm playing and shooting my lowest scores at 64 years old in my entire life. I go to the practice range and I see the same people hitting driver after driver after driver. How many times, speaking of head in the sand, how many times do they go into the bunker and practice bunker play? Rarely. You know, and that's the same kind of thing, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting your game to get better. That's what you're talking about. You mentioned a little bit about personalization. Now, when it comes to the same templated cadenced emails that go to the same list, as you mentioned, versus doing a little bit more of a sniper approach and a little bit more of a account-based, or making sure you know a lot about the person so they'll reply. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's amazing. There's all of these cadence tools out there, and I think they can be very, very valuable. But that is not necessarily your job to be like pushing play on these cadences. I think our job as salespeople is to know the person that you're going after and find a reason to contact them.
You bet.
However, it's super easy to get sucked into this rabbit hole of, I've got a list of 30 people I'm going to call on Thursday, and I need to do a little bit of prep work on those people.
Right.
And if you're not careful, I could end up reading about Bob Perkins on the internet for 6.5 hours. And now I know every single thing about you. I know your golf scores. I know your, your home address. I know some blog that you put out in 2007.
The name of my dog.
Yeah. And frankly, I don't need that. When I'm reaching out to you as a salesperson, I'm reaching out to you because I think I can help you with a business case.
Yeah.
And so my research needs to be targeted towards that. And so I'm a huge advocate of this idea of time blocking. And I don't think everybody does time blocking right.
Yep.
If I've got a list of 30 people that I am going to be contacting later this week and I need to do a little bit of research on them, I'm not going to put an item on my to-do list that says research the call list for Thursday.
Yeah.
I'm going to put an hour on my calendar. I'm going to put 60 minutes on my calendar. And 60 minutes seems like a lot of time to do research on 30 people. But if you actually do the math, that gives me just 2 minutes. It gives me 120 seconds per person.
Yeah.
Which means I need to work at an effective clip and I need to pre-identify what I am looking for.
Right.
One piece of advice that I have for salespeople and even sales leaders around research for accounts and for contacts is pre-identify the top 10 reasons that you could help that organization or person.
Right.
Then when you're doing your research, go through that list of 10. If the organization or person does not satisfy the criteria of one of those 10, they're probably not somebody that you should be reaching out to.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so by defining the scope of the reason to contact somebody, it makes you more effective in your time block and you stop bothering people who you can't help.
You said something prior to going on video, work smarter, not harder. And yeah, some people use that as an excuse, but this is one perfect way. Use the 60 minutes the most efficiently as you can. And, speaking with Steve Richard, who used to have an SDR outbound team as a service, they would set aside 90 minutes every morning when it was not good calling time, or maybe it was 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. They would set that side of time to build their list. And to do a little bit of pre-call research. So, Nick, this has been great. Lots of really good tactical ideas there. I hope viewers, if you're watching, give us your feedback. Nick, your podcast is coming up. Talk quickly about that and when it's going to air and how to find it.
Sure. So the podcast is called 30 Minutes to President's Club.
Love
and
that.
The goal behind the podcast is to be different than most sales podcasts. And most sales podcasts, I'm sure if your listeners are listening to this, they're probably doing a lot of self-education on their own. Most sales podcasts are one step removed from actually being actionable and tactical.
Yes.
There's a lot of talk about theories and strategies and mindset and positive attitude. And don't get me wrong, if you're not working hard, if you don't have the right attitude, if you're not employing effective strategies, like that stuff you have to have.
Yeah.
But there isn't a lot that you can go and grab on out there.
Yeah.
So what we've done is we put together this podcast, and the idea is we interview top sales performers, practitioners, and thought leaders. And the idea is to only talk about practical, actionable, tactical things that you can literally go steal and use that day. So we have people talk through their specific talk tracks, their cold call openers, their email subject lines. Instead of saying you've got to have a great subject line or you've got to have a strong opener, we're actually pushing people and saying, what are you actually saying? Yeah,
that's great. The tactical put to use when they get on their next call. I love it, and help them get to President's Club. I love that too. Listen, Nick, thanks a lot for joining us here today. Everyone, stay safe out there and good selling until next Monday. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Bob.